We are live on YouTube.
And we're on our website, we can start.
All righty, thank you all. Hope you all enjoyed your 4th of July. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off by thanking all of the council members, community board chairpersons, district managers, and Borough Hall staff who are on our Zoom call tonight. Hope everyone's summer has been fun and eventful so far. And I encourage everyone to take some time away if they can. I certainly took a few days, if you haven't noticed. And this evening, we are pleased to be joined by the newly appointed Commissioner of DYCD in the Office of New York City Emergency Management. I will first introduce Commissioner Keith Howard. Keith Howard was appointed Commissioner of the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development by Mayor Eric Adams in June. Whoa, spanking new. Commissioner Howard formerly served as the Associate Deputy Commissioner of the Sidewalk Inspection Management Division at DOT. And Mr. Howard has been no stranger to community work throughout his years in service. In the summer of 2002, he started a nonprofit organization called the Harlem Group, which sponsored health fairs and enrolled over 100 families in free healthcare programs underwritten by the New York State government. In collaboration with his fraternity, I don't even know which fraternity it is, but we'll find out what he's pledging. Commissioner Howard also created a nonprofit called Servants for All. For 10 years, SOA has escorted over 700 plus underprivileged students on college tours to historically Black colleges and universities. And tonight, Commissioner Howard will introduce himself and provide an update on DYCD summer programming and highlight some investments being made in the best borough in our city, and that, of course, is Queens. So I want to thank you and congratulate you and welcome you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Borough President, for the invitation tonight to the Borough Board and Borough Service Cabinet meeting for Queens. I look forward to working with you and Queens elected officials and community boards in the time ahead. Just so you know, I do love Queens. I taught at Queens College as an adjunct professor. To quote, the Borough President, Queens is truly a fantastic place to live and to raise a family. I totally 100% agree with that. Very familiar with all aspects of Queens. It is such an exciting time to be DYCD Commissioner. This month, DYCD launched summer programming, serving a record number of New Yorkers with an unprecedented investment in our young people under the leadership and vision of Mayor Eric Adams. Summer Rising, the Summer Youth Employment Program, and Saturday Night Lights provides academic support, school-based enrichment programming, paid work experience, and Saturday evening sports activity. This means record investment across Queens, from Astoria to the Rockaways and all of the vibrant communities in between. Summer Youth Employment is serving a record 100,000 young people. This gives young people valuable work experience, and I know everyone knows how valuable and what of an investment that is, while earning a paycheck. Over 20,000 youth from Queens will be working this summer. Significant. Summer Rising with 110,000 young people, nearly 29,000 are from Queens. This past Saturday, Mayor Adams announced the expansion of Saturday Night Lights. Young people can enjoy an array of indoor activities at 26 sites in Queens, including basketball, soccer, volleyball, dance, martial arts, and much more. Special thanks, special shout out to the district attorneys and the NYPD for their partnership. And as you know, Queens is blessed to have so many CBOs just doing amazing work. I look forward to working with them. On behalf of your 2.4 million Queens residents, I'm making my rounds of program visits around the 5 boroughs, including Queens, of course, to see the impact of our summer programming on young people and families. And I'm hoping that you will join me as we're making our rounds. I think this partnership is critical. And I wanna, whatever level it was before, I wanna up that level, okay, to as much engagement as possible. You and I, we have met, on a few occasions with I was with DOT on that side of the fence, sidewalks and street improvement projects and Vision Zero work, et cetera. So, excited about the work that I can do on this other side of the fence. And just for the record, I am a member of the first Black fraternal organization, Alpha Phi Alpha, okay, 1906, okay, so that everybody have reference to that. Thank you, Mr. Borough President.
Thank you so much, and we won't hold against you being part of DOT sidewalk. I know every district manager and chair was like, huh? It's a different space. All right. So just some quick questions, then we'll open it up. So obviously we've seen, and relatively what's interesting is we are starting to see a decline in shootings and certainly murders in Queens. However, there are pockets of the borough that still do have many challenges. So for instance, Northern Queens, thinking of the 15th precinct, actually the 101 is doing good. 113, actually, we've seen some progress. 103rd precinct is really struggling. So I'm interested in knowing how the DYC, and I know you're like a month in the job, so I don't want to, make your day on this call yet, but just I want to hear a little bit more of how or what strategies are you looking to implement, especially as we compare CompStat, and we know that policing is one part of safety, as we often say, but making sure that there are resources pumped into many of these communities where we are seeing an increased number of violent incidents, especially among young people. So I'm just interested in hearing how you strategically, and then I guess the second part of the question, which I should just allude to as well, is, there is the crisis management system. How is DYCD coordinating with the crisis management system? And I know that, there's the Mayor's Office of Gun Violence, but sort of interested in how that partnership looks. Like I said, you're here only for a month, but if you don't have an answer for that, that's okay. I just want us to think strategically in ways we can strengthen services, especially in many of the hot pockets around the borough. So can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And just last week, I was visiting one of the CBOs in your borough, Kings to Kings Foundation, with Lance Furtado and his organization. We sat and met for about 2 hours. And as you know, that organization is part of the crisis system management. And what I wanted to hear is what he was able to clearly state to me, and this covers both aspects of your question. My job is to go to those CBOs who are doing the work, like Kings to Kings, and saying, okay, what funding do you need? What is the best practices? How do we stop this gun violence? How do we do the intervention? As the mayor often says, intervention and prevention. Okay. And when I met with him, he was very enlightening. His whole team took me through a bunch of strategies in which I brought my team so that they can listen. It's all through our CBO network. We need to invest heavily into those that are doing the work. Government agencies, although we are a funding source, okay, need to be able to fund those organizations, get out the way, and allow them to do what they do. And if Kings to Kings is that model, and what I mentioned to Lance is I want to incorporate that model, and I want to take it, all over the city, with some very, very strong data to show and support that his organization and his intervention and his prevention programs funded by DYCD, and of course the discretionary money from the elected officials are actually doing the work.
Okay, great. And then, I'm also interested, and you don't have to give that now, just a breakdown of how we compare to the other boroughs in terms of funding when it comes from DYCD. So if you can send that to the office, I won't put you on the spot here, but definitely interested in seeing how resources are being distributed. And I know not before your time, there were challenges in the way the formula. So for instance, as the prior council member to CB 14, we would see a drop off in funding because obviously there was an influx of new residents in the community with higher incomes. So we would see a drop off of funding, for instance, in the areas of Edgemere, partly because as people with higher incomes were coming in, the census data or whatever data y'all were using didn't reflect the poverty that was entrenched in certain parts of CB 14. And I'm just giving that as one example, but I'm definitely interested in the equity conversation, making sure that after school programming, all of those things are happening as equitable as possible across the city, but specifically for Queens. So I know you share that vision. I'm not here to put you on the spot.
No, I have no problem answering that. This is actually a good time to have those conversations because we're getting ready to roll out Compass and Sonic and, a few of the after school programs. I want to hear more about the Cornerstone and the Beacon programs, to see where we are. The other side of the DYCD house is community development. And I think that we need to do more. We get grants, federal grants, and we have a need assessment survey that goes out, so I'd be happy to share it with your staff. And if, whatever feedback, you and your staff can provide, if we need to go in a different way, I'm definitely open to that. I had met with your counterpart in the Bronx, and I mentioned to BP Gibson, I said, if you have a heat map and we have a heat map, which shows exactly where the hotspots are and we are, apart, we need to come together, So what my intentions are is to say, hey, who can I send my staff to sit down and go over what your numbers look like so that we can be on the same page.
Great. And I see Andrew Miller's on. I've known him a long time. So good to see him on as well. All right, I'm gonna pass it on if any chairs or district managers have questions. And I guess the last question I had is, how are you strategically working with public housing? And then we'll turn it over to public housing developments.
Well, it's interesting you said that because our cornerstone programs are in NYCHA. Yep. So we have a significant investment in NYCHA. So we do run programs out of the NYCHA community centers. Now, grant you, some of those community centers definitely need, some capital improvement and capital investments, hoping that there's another level of conversation that we can have in terms of exactly how we can get those capital improvements there, But I can definitely share with you and your staff about the investments and where the investments are in those cornerstone programs.
And please count on me as a partner in capital investment. I can't tell you how much for the next budget because we're done our budget, but please count on me to be a partner in that. Of course, I want the mayor to put up majority of the money, but please count me in as a partner in any upgrades to community centers across the borough as well.
You got it.
Said, I will now turn it over to council members and colleagues if you have any questions for our commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Don't all be shy. No questions? Don't. When I see some of y'all on the street, you're saying, what about our youth? You don't have any questions, Commissioner?
I'm here.
Councilmember Vicky Palladino.
I am very sorry I'm late. And I hate to put you through this, but I probably do have questions if I would have got here sooner. Can you just give me a little briefing if it doesn't take too much of your time?
I want to move because I got the OEM commissioner. So we can, so if you have a question, anything related to youth funding, youth organization, I'll take that, but I gotta get to OEM next. So if you have a question on anything related to your district.
Well, of course. I mean, gee whiz, the list is as long as our two arms going across everything. It's really about the future plans. I'm so sorry I'm late. Oh, darn it. But for me, it's really about what we're going to do with our kids at night. I worry about them from after 4 o'clock on. I'd like to see what we used to have, and two of my schools still do it, where they take the youth, they open up at 5 o'clock and they go until 10 p.m., almost 5 days a week. And some are even open on Saturdays. But now in the summer, it's dead. Not a good thing. So I'm hoping to see something like that. I also like to see more after-school programs. So again, these kids, idle hands, devil workshop. So that's true as it ever was. I just want to know that we're going to be able to do this. Our kids are suffering terribly, and they really need interaction with each other in a positive way. Put your phones down and get involved. Also, some things they could do around their neighborhoods that would make them feel a part of their neighborhoods. Not that they're on the outside looking in or causing problems or whatever, because we have a lot going on here with kids riding recklessly on these gigantic two-wheel bicycles. They're disrupting stores. And these are neighborhood kids just doing the wrong thing. And they need help. And the help they need is a place to meet and a place to do something constructive. I try to get as many kids involved as I possibly can. And I'll be starting up more things on my own come September. But we need to think about that and funding for that. And so much has been cut. So we have to, I really gave quite a bit to my schools for any after-school program possible, because this is what they need. But what do they call the program that they offer in the evenings? What is that called? Does that have a name?
Right, the night lights out. I think I'm right. Commissioner, you can answer that. He did
Yes,
touch on that a little bit. Commissioner, did we lose him?
I think it's Saturday Night Lights.
Saturday Night Lights, right? And he
Yes.
touched on that for a minute.
Yeah,
so there are 26 sites in Queens, I believe he said. And we need to get run down. I think we might have lost him for a second, so we'll try to.
Well,
get
I know about Saturday Night Lights, but I'm talking about Monday through Friday Night Lights.
Okay, got it. Yep.
I'm talking about someplace because they work it here at 209. They do, like I said, from 5 o'clock until 10 o'clock. The gymnasium is open, the cafeteria is open. So if the girls want to congregate in the cafeteria, the guys want to shoot a few baskets, there's what for them to do. But it's just not enough schools. It's not enough. You have one here, dotted here, and then miles away, another one dotted over there. So
and I see Andrew is here. So Andrew, do you want to touch on that until the?
Absolutely. So it is Saturday Night Lights, council member. I'd be delighted to meet with you and your staff to go over what's actually in your district.
Great.
And to show you, and also where we have extended hours as well, because that's certainly, you raise a great point.
Yeah, it's so necessary now more than ever. These kids are running wild, literally wild, whether they're on bicycles or they're on these ATMs, or they're just hanging out. Look, we hung out, we know what we did, but it's just a different mentality now. And I just like to see more positive diversions for them. And, I always circle back to not everybody's meant to be a scientist. I really believe in vocational training for these kids, all kids. They need options. There are none. There are no options for our kids. If they're not scholastic, they can't make it. That's a bunch of bull, because they could come out of high schools, and we should do things constructively with our children in our high schools. Bring back shop, bring back auto mechanic, bring back woodworking, bring back plumber. I am strong believer in alternative education for our kids. Whether we start with them at 14 or we start with them at 17 when they're done, or 16, they need vocational training, and they'll come out making more money with a sound mind, in a union possibly, and starting their own businesses. It would be a way to go about bringing up entrepreneurs. And everybody needs a plumber. Everybody needs an electrician. These things, and car mechanics. I was talking to a veteran, which was extremely interesting, because I would like him to address a town hall that I want to host. I'm big on town halls, and take it to the parents, because a lot of these parents are shaking their heads. Their kids are not doing as well as they could be doing because of other things. They lack interest, which is primarily the problem. And when I could put a fellow like him in front of them, he teaches adjunct at CUNY, and I think he would be great. He was an auto mechanic, owned his own business for many, many years. Now his son has got it. And as an adjunct professor, he teaches auto mechanics. These kids are coming out making 110 grand a year, $120,000 a year, because everything is computerized. So I'd love to offer some workshops so the parents can open up their minds as well to the fact that not everybody's born to be a mathematician or a scientist or things like that. There are so many other ways kids can go and make a really good living. So
All right, thank you. All
Thank
right,
you,
so
Councilmember. Absolutely. I'd be delighted again to sit down with you to discuss the current programs that we do that sort of fit a lot of that vision that you just laid out.
thank you very much. Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have a question from Gary, CB5. And it looks like we lost the commission, so Andrew, you'll be answering all the questions.
That's okay.
All right. Gary, please ask your question.
Yeah, Borough President, I didn't have my hand up, or I don't think I did.
Oh, okay.
I see Dolores Orr next, BP.
So Dolores Orr, CB14.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I have a question and I don't expect the answer tonight. I would be interested to know the 20,000 summer jobs that were filled in Queens. How many of the youth are in with agencies and how many are with the public sector? Because I really feel that we're tremendously missing the opportunity of the private sector.
Okay.
And then I would also love to see someone have a discussion about continuing the funding to allow the individuals who worked the summer program and found it helpful and liked working and started to see a new path in life, that we have funding for them to do it during the school year.
Thanks,
Year
Gary.
round, good point.
Yeah.
Year round.
Yeah.
And that's
Why
a great
can't we
question.
continue it?
So I'm actually pleased to say that as a result of the work of the mayor and the city council, that we are actually now work, learn and grow is in our budget. So that's a continuation of SYEP into the school year. And after
Excellent.
this call, I'll be glad if there's an email, I could just send all the information to everybody. We also worked very hard this year to really diversify the workplace, like workplace opportunities for our young people. And I think we're up to 18,000 different job locations. And the idea is to connect youth to jobs that interest them in the field that they're learning.
Right.
And I want to say shout out to all the council members. I think we're up to 35 council offices that are currently SYEP locations. I mean, that's tremendous. I actually got my start in city government in a city council office. So it's great connections like that.
And you left out borough presidents.
And Borough President, thank you.
I started today in the office. The whole is a buzzing with young people. So
How many did you take? Do you know?
say it again. I think we have close to 20 kids.
Oh, fantastic.
Young people. I don't call them kids, young people.
So one other question in terms with the with NYCHA and providing programs in community centers. I'm in Board 14 in the Rockaways, and we certainly have quite a few NYCHA developments. And the Hamels, the community center, I think it's been like 4 years. It's still under construction. It's not opened, and maybe your agency could push NYCHA a little bit to get it open, because we really are having a lot of issues now with the young people having no place to go in Hamels, and it's not good on the streets.
Sure, I'll certainly take that back. We're in constant conversations with NYCHA and DDC, the folks that do that work at that center and across the city. There's a lot of other centers coming online as well. But you should know that whenever we have to close a program at NYCHA, we actually do then operate a satellite site at a nearby public school. So the young people are getting services in the Rockaways, but it's just not at that center.
Do you know, can you just, when you find out, let me know what site that is?
I will.
Because if it's not convenient for them to get there, they're not going.
I thought they reopened that site though. I thought I was there for the open.
Hamels
Unless they
is
went into
still-
construction again. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, they're still closed, and I know that for a fact, only
Okay.
because voting usually takes place there,
Oh, okay.
and voting is still taking place off-site.
So
in,
Dolores,
in the
after
So we
Dayton
should,
buildings.
Khalil, we should follow up on that as well.
Yeah, yeah, please.
Oh,
It's
okay.
easily 4 years.
Yeah, because I definitely shot a basketball there on their opening day. But they could have went, because I know they're doing Sandy recovery work there now. So that could be the reason.
Yeah, we got, it's 10 years since Sandy.
Yeah, I who you tell.
Thank you.
No
Thank you.
problem. All righty. I think we have Reverend Thorpe next.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Borough President. My question is, I have two questions, and one of them is, there's 26 sites in Queens. How many are in CB12? And I realize you may not have that off the top of your head tonight. And secondly, we have a location in Hollis, a PAL site, but it is not open. Will there be funds sent to open up that site? Because the community is asking for it as well.
So let me just, so in terms of the Saturday Night Lights, I'll have to look at the list and see which ones in fact, I'll send the whole list out probably sometime this week to the whole board, so you have that access to that valuable information. In terms of the PAL, do you know what type of program it was? Was it DYCD funded? Was it a beacon program?
I really cannot tell you that. Ms. Reddick is on, my district manager. Maybe she can speak to exactly which program was in there. Ms. Reddick?
And the OPAL is a school now, so.
Right.
So, yeah, so I don't know if it's 192 would probably be, because the PAL is a school.
'Cause I can speak to
But the
this-
school is asking for after-school programming. So, and I know that for a fact.
Okay.
So yeah, so we should definitely at the very least, and Andrew, I would love for, you know, at a different time, we have a nonprofit network, and it's about, we got a few hundred of nonprofits from around Queens who are part of it. And I know you're going to be offering grants and opportunities and RFPs. And we want to make sure that those organizations are aware of the opportunities. So the staff will be in touch with you or the commissioner to come to present those opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. When we formalize, because obviously we're going to have to do a concept paper and then an RFP sooner than later for most of our programs, actually. And we've done tremendous work over the past, well, I've been with DYCD a long time, as you know, Mr. Borough President, but we've done a lot of work trying to expand the base of Queens programs, not just Manhattan. So, and we've been successful in that.
And we could always use additional funding for 40 projects. I understand that we do have a cornerstone program there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're now at 99 locations citywide, so we're very proud of that. And we actually have a couple more in the pipeline. I know we were waiting for Baisley Park, which is in the Speaker's District. So that's another one of those DDC concerns, like when are they going to do the construction so we can move in there? But in the meantime, we may open a satellite program nearby.
Excellent, because in the Baisley houses, their recreational room is unusable. The air and the fumes and whatever else is going on in that room, it needs to be looked into.
Yeah, so we are going to have a meeting soon to look at swing space that may be available, may be suitable for some type of after-school program while we wait for the construction to be done at the
And
permanent.
we should, and Khalil, we should follow up too. I know the speakers on it as well on the Baisley PAL Center. Because that should be moving, and that was something that started under the prior mayor from a town hall I remember being at. So that center we need to see open for these young people.
Thank you.
Khalil, you want to call who's next? Oh, Sherry, Marie, and then Frank. I think I got it right. Sherry, Marie, then Frank.
Yes. Hello. Hi, nice to be here. It's Sherry Algrado. One of the questions I have is about citywide programs and more more programs needed for young adults, young people with disability, odd activity that's needed year round. Many of these family and these kids, they're unable to travel, to Astoria or further to get these, whatever is available. But we actually need a lot more programs for young people with disability. It's really needed in the neighborhood, especially in Queens.
And Sherry, that I appreciate that. That's something that we're hearing a lot more of, which is a good thing, and more stronger advocacy for that. As you know, most of our program, we do serve young people with disabilities in a lot of our programs, but I get your point that there could be more resources put into that. So we could work with you in the time ahead about how can we serve more young people with special needs.
And also I had one more quick thing, also swimming. It's so important to teach the young people swimming. The problem is some of these programs where they're swimming, it's very expensive and the families can't afford it because it takes months for some kids to learn to swim. So this is something, we have some pools in some high schools that are not being utilized. The space is there, the pool is there, but it's going to take money to fix them. So this is one of the things we also need for our youths, to teach them at a young age to swim, especially since there are many families that can't afford.
And you're absolutely right. And we hear so many times tragedies, particularly in the Rockaways, about young people drowning every year. I think there was one recently off Howard Beach.
Two young men, yeah. And two in Rockaway the next weekend.
Yeah, and I would suggest, there are programs like the Swim Strong Foundation, or I forget that they may not be foundation, but definitely some support from DYCD with a laser focus on swimming. And I know Parks Department is coming up. I know they do a lot of the training, but definitely looking at programs that do center this water safety would be helpful too. So just throwing that out there as well. All right, we're now going to, who am I going to, Khalil?
Marie is next from CBA.
Great, and then Frank.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Howard spoke about the CBOs and the wonderful work that they're doing. The way the funding work with DYCD, they're approved to run a program, and it's pretty much like an IOU because the CBO has to put out the money first, and then they get reimbursed. My concern is that to make sure that they do get the money so that they continue on. I understand that there have been issues with the CBOs getting the money refunded to them, but then again, there goes another fiscal year. If they don't get that money back, they cannot reinvest it for our youth in our communities. So that is something that I would like to see DYCD look into and ensure that our CBOs are getting the money that they need so they can service our communities.
Marie, you're absolutely right. A CBO can't be expected to do their job if they don't get paid on time. I know we've been working very fast and furiously to get through some of the backlog issues that we've been experiencing, particularly with the RFP contracts. I do know that our fiscal team does give CBOs some monies in advance, and we've actually, sometimes the issue is that their contract's not is not registered with the controller's office, so then you can't pay them on that. So we give them advances on their other contracts. But certainly I appreciate what you're saying, and that we have to do a better job of paying the CBOs more timely.
Is there anything DYCD can do to work with the controller's office to make sure that the contracts are done on time?
We have a great relationship with the controller's office. We try to get to them as quickly as possible. The new system last year, Passport, may have caused some delays, but as we and the CBOs learn it, the process is getting quicker and quicker. And in cases where the contracts may not have been registered yet, we also work with the fund of the city of New York to also provide some loans as well to the CBOs to give them the liquidity they need to make payroll.
And let me add to that.
I'm sorry.
Let me add to that for a second, that the mayor and the comptroller have a task force around us, and I know we had the comptroller on our nonprofit network like 2 weeks ago. So they are working through and making some immediate improvements to the system. Still not perfect yet, but the task force work on this is ongoing. But I do anticipate things will not be perfect, of course, but be much better. And that's something I think Comptroller Lander has been laser focused on as well recently.
Good. Andrew, you mentioned you cut out a little bit. You mentioned something somewhere where you reach out to try to get them, the CBOs, some help financially.
Yeah, there's a fund where we actually give them loans to get them through until they're registered, and then they can apply for reimbursement.
Okay.
And the other
All right,
challenge is
thank you.
also in terms of sometimes discretionary money takes a long time, and part of that, and that's all reimbursement based, and part of that is at times that the organizations aren't even cleared yet. So there's a cleared list that's put out monthly by the city council and MOX. That then gives the agency such as DYCD the ability then to enter into contract negotiations with them. And that itself could be a lengthy process. But we find the shorter you make the clearance process, the quicker we can work with the CBOs to do their contracts and get it registered.
Okay. Well, I think I'll reach out to you offline.
Yes, and I will say,
Thank
you can reach out to me. I know many city council members reach out to me concerning the status of their discretionary grants as well. And we try to work through the issues.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Giovanna?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for putting this forum together. Greatly appreciate it. My question is to DYCD. What are you doing to expand or increase the number of participants in these programs? There are, for example, in my district, churches and volunteer organizations that are doing the work, working with our young people, and they don't have access to city funding. Are you looking to expand these expander base?
Well, it's important to look where we've come. I've been with DYCD since 2006. And our budget back then was in the range of like $250 million. And half of it actually came from the city council, just discretionary money. We're now at $1.3 billion. And so that means that we are now at 99 NYCHA locations. We expanded the Beacon programs to 92 locations. I'm going to open an additional one. The number of campus programs are up to almost 900 across the city. And again, as our commissioner mentioned earlier, we've expanded the number of Saturday Night Lights programs, as well as the number of summer youth employment program slots this year has been 100,000. So there has been a lot of great movement on the part of youth services in New York City. It's remarkable and great. It's been an exciting time to work here to see this unprecedented growth. And hopefully through everyone's support, this can continue.
Okay, my question then is what can these volunteer groups, can they apply for funding? And I guess offline you can advise on what that process should be.
Absolutely.
They're actually doing the work.
Absolutely. We always encourage all providers to register on Passport to get any solicitation that DYCD or any other human service agency puts out, because you got to be in it to win it, right? And you have to respond to RFPs to get government money. And then the second part of that, obviously, is you getting your foot in the door is by first applying for council discretionary grants. Obviously, that's over for this fiscal year, but the council usually launches that application period sometime in January, so they could apply for that funding that way as well.
And they have to have nonprofit status, of course. And if they don't, there are other opportunities out there. For instance, the Citizens Committee of New York does provide very small grants for organizations who may not have a formal 501c3 as well. So just, those are groups we can all invite you to. But if you know of nonprofits, I would suggest they join our nonprofit working group, which, like I said, has hundreds of people. We have guest speakers, we have banks, we have folks come on at least once a month who are not just we're not solely relying on public financing. but also private financing to help local organizations as well. So there's, more than one way to skin a cat. Not that I want to skin a cat, take that away, but
Thank you.
to find resources.
Thank you.
Right? All right, thank you, Giovanni. All right, any other questions on this topic?
Yes, I have.
Lynette had her hand raised from Speaker Adams' office.
Yes, thank you and good evening, Donovan, Borough President, and your presentation of DYCD, very informative. I just have one particular question. Of course, we applaud the number of youth that will be employed this year, and we applaud the expansion of your programs and your provider sites. I just have one question. Sorry for the airplane going on Rockaway. The airplane going by every 3 minutes. But I just have one question. How extensive are your efforts to match older youth with meaningful employment? Because we find like families come into this to the council district concerned with their older youth. You have the program from, I think it's 17 to 24 or 16 to 24. And oftentimes the parents said their children, their older adults, older youth are not interested in some of the offerings. So have you all made a more targeted effort to create meaningful opportunities, SYEP opportunities for this age group? Thank you.
Yeah, we do. We actually tailor we really, if you looked at it, we've been really intentional about tailoring the SYEP into different service models to meet the specific needs of young people. So, I mean, up until fairly recently, the program served up to 21. Now we are up to 24. And again, we're trying to, as Commissioner mentioned earlier, we have about 18,000 work locations. And we're trying to provide the young person with an experience that they're more interested in doing. But we also have other workforce development programs that target disconnected young people. That means young people who are not in school, who are not working, to meet their needs as well, to give them an internship and training as well. So after this call, I'll be delighted to share with everyone the information about where they could locate those programs.
Okay, and I appreciate that because you open up with, if you can look at or if you can see, and I'm not sure if I've seen the types of jobs, locations, one thing, employment opportunities specifics is something else. And if you have that information, it'd be very helpful to get a better sense of what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think last question, Frank Taylor. Thank you, Lynette.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Borough President. Appreciate this very much. We appreciate these programs. But I thank my district manager who was here a little bit earlier, Ms. Giovanna Reed. We need more programs like this in CB3. We have a problem with drugs, with youth with drugs. We have a problem with youth with motorcycles. These things that, if they do chase them, they hit people, everything else. But my question is, has there been any outreach dealing with this program with the adults, with their parents, in order to maybe get them to this program?
So meaning using parents to recruit.
Yeah, you go into the schools, you're trying to recruit young people who are probably in high school at this time. Is there any direction to the parents of those young people to get them into these programs? Well, I mean, everything is directed towards the young people, which I get. I understand that. But if we directed some of that to the parents, maybe they would put more pressure on them to join these programs.
That's a great question, Frank. And the vast majority of our after-school programs are located in public schools. And we have a very close working relationship with the Board of Education, the Department of Education that enrolls young people in this. I could tell you the demand for Summer Rising this year is overwhelming. And a lot of that was actually due to parents who said to us, we want something for our young people to do this summer. And they made sure that their kids got a slot in that program. So yes, I think parents play a big role. We work with the parent coordinators at the schools and they know our programs that are on the ground, and they work with parents to ensure that young people that want to go to after school can go to after school.
And I, in all transparency, I am the parent of a Summer Rising student. It's a great program, and they're tired when they come home.
That's what you want.
8 to 6 is great, even though he's running around now. It's a great program, though. All righty. Any other questions? All right, and I would suggest if you have follow-up on this and you need follow-up with DYCD, you can go through Khalil, and let's try to figure out some ways we can maximize opportunities.
And I got to thank Khalil. He's been fantastic.
Thank you, Khalil. That means a lot coming from Andrew Miller. I've known him a long time. I don't want to show my age. All right, thank you. Thank you to the commissioner. Thank you, and now we're going to move on. For our next agenda item, our last agenda item, we are pleased to be joined by Brian Fognali and Kiara Salomon. I think I got that right, from the New York City Emergency Management Office. Brian Fognali is the Deputy Director for the Legislative Affairs at NYC EM. Prior to working at NYC EM, he worked for the New York City Office of Management and Budget and the New York State Assembly. Kiara Salomon is an intergovernmental outreach specialist at NYC EM. Prior to joining NYC EM, Ms. Salomon served as a disaster action team survivor for the American Red Cross. Brian and Kiara will share with us how Queens residents can be prepared for this hurricane season through key programs and resources, including Know Your Zone, Notify NYC, Share Your Space, and more. And thank you both for joining us. You can now take it away.
Thank you, Borough President Richards. Kiara.
Hello. Thank you, Borough President. Thank you, all community boards and the rest of the Queens community for having us here today. So I am Kiara Solomon. Oh, sorry. Let me share my screen first. That would be helpful. Okay. Can I just get a thumbs up from someone if you can see my screen?
You're good.
Perfect.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So again, my name is Kiara Solomon. I'm with New York City Emergency Management, and today we are here to discuss coastal storm preparedness. So who are we? At New York City Emergency Preparedness, we help New Yorkers before, during, and after emergencies through preparedness, education, and response, such as what we're doing right now. The agency is responsible for coordinating citywide emergency planning and response for large and small-scale emergencies. It's staffed by more than 200 dedicated professionals with diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise. So coastal storms. There are 3 different types of coastal storms: tropical depression, tropical storm, and a hurricane. The main difference between each of these storms is the wind speed. But for our purposes, all coastal storms are dangerous and we need to prepare for them in the event that an emergency occurs. So Atlantic hurricane season begins June 1st and ends November 30th of every year. New York City's most at risk for a hurricane between August and October. This was most notable last year with Ida, which occurred in September, and 10 years ago with Hurricane Sandy that occurred in October. As such, every household should include planning for coastal storms in their personal emergency plans. So there's 3 steps to emergency preparedness. Step 1 is make a plan, step 2 is gather supplies, and step 3 is to stay informed. So we'll be using the My Emergency Plan Guide as your resource for today. My colleague Brian will drop a link to this guide in the chat right now. And this emergency plan guide is available in 14 languages. So almost everyone in the city has access to this. So the first step of making a plan is creating an emergency support network. We encourage everyone to have an emergency support network, including someone who lives in New York City and someone who does not live in New York City. Does anybody want to take a guess as to why we would like 2 people in your network at minimum, with someone in the city and someone outside the city? Okay, I see we have a shy audience, no worries. So the answer to that is we would like someone in the city to say if there is an emergency, you have someone local that can help you. But if there is a large scale emergency that the entire city is affected by, you would have a resource outside the city that can help you out. So the next step of making a plan is writing down important health and life-saving information. Basically write down your medication, the milligrams, your dosage, who your doctor is, have a copy of your documentation, such as your license, your passport, etc. And step 3 is having a transportation plan. A lot of times in the events of an emergency, subways and buses are not running. We saw this last year, a couple of subway stations flooded. So when things of that nature happen, we need to have a plan to know how are we going to leave. And an important step of planning for an emergency is knowing when to go and when to stay. Basically, if you need to evacuate your home or stay in place. Know your evacuation zone and closest hurricane evacuation center. You can find out this information by visiting nyc.gov/knowyourzone, or you can call 301, whichever is more convenient for you. As mentioned, the next step of preparedness is gathering supplies. So in the event that you have to evacuate, we encourage everyone to create a go bag. So who needs a go bag? Anyone want to give it a shot? No worries. Again, shy audience. Everyone, yes, that is correct. You need a go bag. Your children need a go bag. Your parents need a go bag. Your pets need a go bag. Any and everyone needs a go bag. Anybody want to take a guess as to when you
Kiara, I'm showing leadership. Look at my go bag.
That's wonderful.
All right.
Glad to see it. Well, since you're such a great volunteer, would you like to take a guess as to how often we're supposed to change out supplies in our go bags?
I'm not that good.
Every 6 months. Every 6 months. 6 months.
Every 6 months? Okay.
Yes,
That's
every
mine.
6 months or every
But not 6
seasonal.
years? Okay, got it. Yeah.
No, not 6 years, actually. We encourage seasonal changes, so 6 months is correct. So in the winter, you may want to pack a bag with blankets, extra socks, things to stay warm. And in the summer, springtime, you may want to pack a bag that has looser fitting clothing, extra bottles of water, etc. And as I said, everyone in your house needs a go bag, including our furry little friends. And in the event that you do need to evacuate, pets and service animals are welcomed in evacuation center sites. They may be placed in a different room to accommodate individuals with allergies or fear of animals, but they are safe and welcome to come. And additionally, when it comes to creating a go bag, think of special considerations. Do you have medication? Do you have glasses? You know what you need more than anybody else. So whatever it is that you need to live your day-to-day life in the events of emergency, pack it. Okay. And another version of gathering supplies is putting together an emergency supply kit. So this is in the event that there is an emergency and you have to stay home and you cannot leave your home. So the go bag is perfect if you need to evacuate and leave, but this is for if you need to stay stationary and stay home. So similar to the go bag, it has all the essentials that you'll need. So food, water, clothing, things of that nature. Okay. And the next step of preparedness is staying informed. One of the best ways to stay informed is to know your zone. Here is a map of Queens and all of its hurricane evacuation zones and centers. Zone 1 is most vulnerable to hurricane damage. So you can see that it would include like far rockaways and things of that nature. And then zone 6, you're least likely to experience experience hurricane damage and need to evacuate. That being said, everybody is at risk of being in an emergency situation, and you need to prepare for an emergency. Another way to stay informed is through Notify NYC. Notify NYC is a free opt-in notification service that allows New Yorkers to receive information about emergency situations and planned events throughout the city. Notify is offered in 14 different languages, and the notification types vary from emergency alerts, planned events, weather updates, traffic disruptions. And the beauty of it is you can choose which notifications you receive. You don't need to hear about all to all of these notifications. You can narrow into just emergency alerts, or you can broaden it to a select few. How to sign up for Notify? You can visit nyc.gov/notify-nyc to receive emails and text notifications. You can follow Notify NYC on Twitter. If you would like to follow Notify NYC on Twitter, put in the handle @NYC_language. The example shown here is NNYC Arabic. If you go on Twitter and type that in, you will find Notify NYC notifications in Arabic. And additionally, on the screen, you have QR codes which can redirect you to the application. So in addition to being, another step of preparedness is pillars of the community helping out. Right here, I'm going to tell you a little bit of Share Your Space, which is a way to the city identify spaces in the community that can be helpful during an emergency operation, or it can be used for community outreach events. Can you hear my audio?
I think turn it up a little bit more.
Were you able to hear my audio?
No.
Very loud.
Yeah, Kiara, if you could just turn up the volume on that, I think it might help.
Let's see. Okay, I have the volume here on max, so.
Okay, so we'll send the video in the chat. I'll briefly explain Share Your Space. So Share Your Space is a volunteer program where individuals and say like veterans halls or property owners with large spaces can volunteer their space to be used during an emergency event. So if you would like to do this, you can submit to our survey, and we can have our staff assess whether or not this is a type of facility that we can use for an emergency, for say a commodity distribution point, any type of thing that we may need during the event. So in the event that we do call you and say it's a wedding hall and we say, hey, we really need this space, can we use it? And you say, hey, I've got a wedding that day, I can't move things around. We say, thank you very much. We appreciate your putting yourself into the survey, and we move on to the next space. So this is totally voluntary, and we will allow for, if the property owner can't do it, we don't hold it against them. We know how things go, and we just appreciate the fact that they're willing to serve when they are able to. And Kiara, I'll hand that back to you.
Thank you, Brian. He did better than the video. So another way that the community can help in preparedness is through strengthening communities. Strengthening communities is meant to deepen community preparedness through pillars of the community. We do so through community emergency planning modules and preparedness trainings. Additionally, we have programs to help to have coaching sessions, as well as program sessions for networking. Okay, and this is a video of strengthening communities. I'll try again, and let's see if you guys can hear the audio. If not, I'll bounce it back to Brian. Can you hear that?
Okay, so Strengthening Communities is a new program that we have implemented over the past 6 months or so, where community networks that are pre-established can apply for funding and become a part of the emergency support network through emergency management. This does offer amounts of funding to community groups, and it helps for them to do further outreach into hard to reach communities that need specialized attention and need trusted voices to do that outreach surrounding emergency preparedness. So a great example of this would be and I'm going to take from my own community, a group like Woodside on the Move. They're a known community network that provides a number of different services, and they're an example of a community group that we would like to integrate into the emergency planning process and help out during an emergency in that particular community.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, so that concludes the presentation. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to start with, let's go through. So obviously during Ida, and I appreciate the flood maps, but during Ida, we saw neighborhoods that historically weren't hit by catastrophic storms who suffered major damage. And out of the prior administration, so moving in, I don't know if this is too much for you, but I want to hear about, and I know you talked about NYC notification, is OEM in the process on developing a program for basement apartments specifically? Because we obviously saw a lot of individuals, unfortunately, we lost individuals to the flood, to Ida. And I'm interested in knowing, are there any new programs or strategies or outreach programs you're doing on notifying people who live in basement apartments? And then I guess the second question I have is on language access, and I'm very appreciative of the app being culturally competent, I guess I want to say. But are you working with local organizations in many parts of the borough, specifically Asian communities who were hit very hard in Flushing during the last storm that we had? So I'm just interested in knowing how you're working with nonprofits and CBOs. And I really do urge all the community, because they can't do this alone, and I'm not here to pretend they can. So our community board partners, being that we're going to have as it's been shown, a more active storm season, we need to make sure we're getting this message out to all of our board members and really flooding social media and other avenues of communication to ensure that this message is really getting out to the public. So just talk about language access, community partnerships. I know we work with the CERT teams. I know you do as well, but interested in hearing what that looks like.
Yeah, Borough President Richards, thank you so much for those questions. So in terms of language access, we are always doing our best to try to get out into communities that are hard to reach. We do that by leaning on our partnerships with elected officials. We do that with our community board partners. We always want to do more. Prior to COVID, we were doing about 1,000 public presentations a year, whether that be tabling events or whether that be presentations like this. We're slowly climbing back up to that number, and we want to do more. If you can connect us with community groups that you know we should be talking to, we're happy to do that. Through our Strengthening Communities program and our Community Preparedness program, those folks do a number of different types of trainings out in the community, including something that we call the Community Preparedness Boot Camp. That is a program that allowed for, say, a civic association or a faith community to train as a group on how to be prepared for emergencies, tap into what existing strengths that they had, and figure out what some of their potential weaknesses were, and with our staff coach them through how to overcome those weaknesses. So in terms of that, we're out in the community. This Strengthening Communities program, we're very hopeful will continue to train and make communities more resilient. In terms of the actions taken after Ida, so yes, super aware of the fact that folks in basement apartments are most vulnerable. We have actually reconfigured our messaging surrounding basement apartments to give specific preparedness tips in our press releases, in our notify messages, on our website, in our presentations here, to advise those folks to go to higher ground if they're living in a basement, to stay with friends and family if they know that a large storm is coming. We want folks to be as prepared as possible and include the fact that they live in basement apartments within their emergency plan, and act on that plan. In terms of like doing specific things, I know you mentioned basement apartments, but just want to be clear here. We can do the preparedness outreach. We can do that kind of stuff. Making them up to code or categorizing them or creating the database of where these folks are is not something we can do, but we are doing our best to reach those folks that are in basement apartments to make sure that they have the tools they need to stay safe.
And when you say you're doing outreach efforts, I would suggest that this is not happening for OEM to be out in these neighborhoods. So we were out in Flushing, for instance, a few weeks ago with, you might have been there with OEM, DEP, and other agencies, but really want to make sure that the communities that were hit by Ida and Sandy, quite frankly, are really being prioritized, and that those outreach efforts are really being done in a genuine way. East Elmhurst, for instance, as well, to ensure that residents are really armed with information. And, you know, NYC, notify NYC, did I get that right, is good. But, you know, I'm concerned that a press release is not speaking to the general public. So we all have a part to play. I'm not putting that just on you. My team and I know we're doing an event with you in a few weeks, but I really urge everybody to play a part here, a role here to ensure that the general public is aware of Notify NYC and other avenues to ensure that they're, you know, could be best protected in the event we see another catastrophic storm. Because this is not just centered, you know, the first place when Ida hit that I got up and drove to, well, got up and went to, was the Rosedale and the Rockaways. And quite frankly, we did well there, partly because of the infrastructure investment, and then also a lot of the work that the Army Corps is doing, but we know the Bay is still unprotected. But a lot of the areas that we saw the flooding in are areas that we wouldn't have thought we would have experienced that flooding. So I say that to say, like, we should make sure we're going back to these areas, providing them with the sandbags and tools to minimize impact. None of us can control Mother Nature, but we can try to be as best prepared as possible. So just making sure we're doubling down and getting into those neighborhoods is going to be critical to preserving life as we move through this next storm season.
Yes, sir. And again, we're always welcoming any partnership we can do with our elected partners, with our community board partners. If you have groups or events coming up that you'd like us to be at, please let us know as soon as possible so we can try to staff those events and try to staff those events with folks that can speak in the language that those communities are most comfortable in.
Okay, Khalil, you'll call the questions. There are questions?
Yes, Reverend Dobbs, are you there?
Yes. Two things. I just would like the borough president to know that in CB12, our street signs in regards to emergencies, how to exit out of the area, they need to be rechecked. And some of them are faded. Some of them are missing. So that's one piece of preparation that we need to have that looked at. And in regards to this entire emergency program, I'm very interested in it. There's a few schools, surrounding schools, that I would like for us to speak to, or have someone maybe from OEM to speak to them in regards to safety locations. When Sandy hit and people came in out of the Rockaways, I think in preparation, now that we've seen what can happen, we need to have a school prepared to take them in.
Yeah, Reverend, let me take that second question first and then go back to the evacuation sign question. So when we showed you the map of the evacuation centers, those are think of evacuation centers as the sun in the solar system, and then around that sun, there are other shelters that can be activated. So we know that those evacuation centers are going to be like our key centers to start. And then once those fill up, we have transportation plans in place to take folks from that center to a different shelter. And to speak very generally here, our shelters are all DOE facilities, they're schools. The reason we don't publicize them is we don't want folks to go to a DOE school that was maybe a shelter one time, but is now no longer a shelter for whatever reason. Maybe the school's closed, maybe it's not ADA accessible, maybe there's another reason. So what you saw there is just the beginning stages of an evacuation from a hurricane, and all of our evacuation centers and evacuation shelters need to be outside of the flood zone. That's why you're not going to see any. That's why you may have to go a considerable distance to get to one. Now, regarding the signs for evacuation zones, those signs are just pointing people away from low ground and away from the coasts. This is why we really, really want to encourage folks to have their own evacuation plan that takes into account how they're going to get somewhere. In cities that are generally smaller and have one or two ways out, coastal storm signs work in such a way that you could just direct people out of the city. New York City is obviously not like that. And those signs are meant to give people a guide to go away from the coasts, but folks should implement their own emergency preparedness plan and transportation plan when that is happening. And in the event of an evacuation, the MTA, we partner with them, and there will be considerably more buses and subways coming out of those zones to ensure that people can transport themselves out.
Will we get a list of these emergency locations?
Regarding those schools, you mean?
Yeah, and is York College, will York College be open in case of an emergency?
So I can't comment on whether or not York College is on our hurricane evacuation shelter list. We don't make those public. We make the evacuation centers public so that people know to go there. And then based on the need, seeing how many people are evacuating, we can send folks to the different satellite shelters as needed. We don't want folks to go to a place on their own that may no longer be a shelter.
Okay, but again, the signs should be available. They should be readable. And I understand what you're saying, that it directs away from coastal areas, but we don't ever, we can say what we say about a storm, but storms change and do what they do. So we do need our signs to be brought up to date and visible for the community in case there is a need to exit out or go further inland or to higher ground.
Reverend, if you could provide me or provide my team some examples of that. If you have the locations, we'd love to take them back to our team here.
Okay. I need a contact number so I can reach out to you.
Sure. I'll drop that in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Dolores Orr from CB14.
Good evening. So before I talk about Zone 1 and Rockaway, I just wanted to ask legislatively, is there anything in place? I live in a high-rise building. Is there anything in place that might require the building management to have a building evacuation plan and communicate it to the residents? The reason I'm asking that is for Sandy, I came home from work and the elevators were shut down. I live on the 11th floor. I had to climb 11 flights of stairs to get to my home. And there was never any advance notification of that. So I really think the city needs to start requiring building management to take some of the responsibility. What is the building's plan for evacuation? What could we expect? At what time the elevators are shut down? And unfortunately, they shut them down because the wind can certainly take them off their tracks, right? And then you get stuck. But they foolishly left the elevators sitting on the ground floor rather than bringing it up one flight, and we had no elevators for 7 weeks. But that's another story. The other thing is, I think it's also should be required that building management require everyone to fill out an emergency contact for themselves, how do they get in touch with their resident, but also next of kin or next person to be notified. And critically is to note, for people to note when they have medical needs that require electricity. And that's not only in a hurricane, because we had a shutdown of electricity because of a flood in the building and the line. And we went banging on the doors of that whole line. It turned out there was somebody on a ventilator. Had we not done that, that person would have died. So I think the city needs to look at requiring building management to start to take care of some of that. That being said, when we have a full evacuation, as we did in Rockaway and Howard Beach and Garrison and various locations during Sandy, there's a lot of people that have no way to evacuate. They don't have means to, they're disabled. They can't climb 4 flights of stairs to the subway in Rockaway. And what bus are they getting on to take them where? We've asked OEM in the past to create a bus evacuation plan and then identify certain locations where we know that there is that need to say, in the event of evacuation, a bus will stop here and get you. And also to post what the evacuation center is. So if I'm getting in my car, I don't know where the evacuation center is, but if that signage is there with the evacuation route, it's not the shelter. I understand the difference. Why aren't we posting where the evacuation center is? So somebody gets on a bus on their own, and where are they going? They don't know where the evacuation center is. So I think that the city needs to take ownership of that. And we're still, it's 10 years and we still don't have any evacuation signs in Rockaway.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up our disability access and functional needs neighbors. In the event that a individual cannot evacuate on their own, if an evacuation order is issued, those individuals can call 311 and we can, the 311 operator will take them through a number of questions to see what their level of functionality is, and those folks will, we have a program that we run with FDNY, NYPD, and our staff that will help get those folks out to either a evacuation center, a special medical needs shelter, or in the event that they are extremely endangered, a hospital. So that is the first thing on that. Can you remind me of the first question, please?
Was requiring the management companies of large high-rise to have an evacuation plan, to have contact information and identify those with special medical needs. That legislatively to require it.
So as far as I know, legislatively, there is not anything at the current moment that's on the docket. We encourage folks to keep their own emergency support networks. New York City's a transitory city. People come in and out. I don't know personally the efficacy of having building managers maintain those lists. I think that would be kind of a moving target. I think in terms of building managers having a plan to evacuate the building, what you're saying, obviously, I think they should be letting people know whether or not they're going to shut the elevators down. I think they should be doing that in non-emergency times as well. Unfortunately, the way that we have to have individuals prepare is individually, and we want individuals to have their own emergency plans and to be able to implement them. So at this time, there is no requirement for building managers to do that. But I'm open to hearing suggestions of how you would like that to happen. But that said, we are not a legislative entity either. We are a city agency.
Oh, but I saw that you're director of legislative affairs, so I thought you were interactive with the city council on possible legislation. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the last thing I just, since we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of Sandy, I would like to invite OEM to our September community board meeting. And
please do.
we'll send you a notice. Thank you.
We would love to. Yeah. Please send that to intergov@oem.nyc.gov. You said the September meeting?
Yes, let me just look at the calendar. It's the second Tuesday of the month. I don't
Okay.
have that in my head yet.
That's fine. Nor do I. But
Yes.
September is National Preparedness Month, and it does get booked up very quickly for us.
So
So
it's
please,
September 13th.
okay, if you can send that
Yes.
to us via email as soon as possible, we'd be
Yes.
happy to try to accommodate that
Okay.
request.
All
I don't want you to
Thank
try, Brian. I want you to do it. And in the
I'll
other,
talk to Christina.
Yeah, Dolores, Chair Orr spoke of high rises and multi-dwelling buildings. I'm pretty sure I had passed some ledge relating to NYCHA and seniors back in my days in the council. So we should, and I'll have my team go back and look at that. Because one of the challenges that we had during NYCHA during the storm is we didn't know, many of our seniors were trapped and didn't have any assistance, and phone lines were knocked out. So I think we had required, if I'm correct, for the city to come up with a database for seniors specifically in public housing. So let's double back on that. And if that didn't pass, we should go back and look at it as a model. And maybe
Mr. Borough President, I also want to just take the opportunity to let people know that if there are individuals that need life-sustaining equipment, Con Ed runs a program where they mark off where those people are. So please, 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 please encourage those folks or their caretakers to register them with Con Ed. That I'll try to find that.
Except
as we're going
Rockaway is
through
not
questions.
serviced by Con Ed.
I believe PSE&G has a similar program.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll be going to Betty from CB10.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Brian and Kiara, thank you very much for everything OEM has done. Working with OEM over the last 10 years has been an agency that is very responsive, and I want to thank you for that. One of the things that would be helpful is that in years past, OEM has posted on their website in one of the links on the side, it was a package specific to each community board. It had a map of that community board's evacuation zones. It had what the evacuation main center was. It had listings of other information. You know, in a perfect world, everybody would go on OEM's website and click in and find their zone. Not everybody does that, but we do have the ability to reach a lot of our people directly. And if that package were put up again, and I believe there had been some legislation at one point that required it, but the last time I looked, it wasn't there. I had my map, so I didn't really need it, but I think it would be helpful if you could provide that to every community board. You know,
No, Betty, we really appreciate that feedback. We know, we love working with you as much as we can. But one of the things too, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, those maps are, those are great for folks that want to look at it from a community board perspective. We really want folks to be looking at it from an individual preparedness perspective, and we want everyone to know their zone. And
I'll do it.
Certainly, but we're trying our best to get everyone to know what zone they're in. And like you said, not everyone is going to go online and do it. Everyone is welcome to call 301 as well, and they can provide you the information on your evacuation center and your hurricane evacuation zone.
And another issue, it's kind of extraneous, and it not particularly, I don't think it's an OEM thing to do, but it may be something on a borough level that we need to start doing. I'm sure Dolores would agree with me. One of the things that occurred during Sandy was, people were able to evacuate with their cars.
Mm-hmm.
But you gotta have a place to put the car. And then, the people who didn't evacuate, we had thousands and thousands of cars just all over the place. We have to come up with some type of a plan. But where is there an ability for people to remove vehicles from the floodplains and get them to a location where they can be parked, and to identify places around the evacuation centers where people will be able to park.
It's a great question. Let me run that by my team, please.
I think that's one more on a political level, not necessarily OEM, but.
That was an excellent question, actually.
Next, we have Chair Kelty from CB7.
Thank you, Borough President. Just a quick comment, and I'm sorry, I might have heard it, but when Dolores says the question, but Brian, when I worked for the fire department and many years ago on the community board, Con Edison had what they call essential services notification. And they had in their database that if anybody had electricity problems, they knew right away, because I had shut down the building one time on 96th Street, and I told Con Edison, run the building, let me know we're taking it down completely. We want all the power down. And they brought up that there were several people in the building with medical supply problems. So I know Con Edison has it, but I don't know. I think Far Rockaway might be on the national grid, so I don't know what they have.
They're under PSE&G, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, yeah. I just know that Con Edison ran it, and they used to do once a year. They used to go after the people, especially medical people that had the machines for making oxygen. They needed to have extra bottles put in, stuff to that effect. You can check with Con Edison.
Con Ed, as far as I know, still does that program.
Okay.
I'm hopping on a call tomorrow about heat, and I'm sure they will run through that again. But generally speaking, they do proactive outreach to their LSE customers.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Brian. Thank you,
You got
Mr. Borough President.
Next, we're back to Reverend Dorbs from CB12.
Yes, thank you. Brian, I was just thinking that listening to everyone, the questions that they're asking, it just came to mind. You all have a plethora of maps of where the emergency signs are located or should be located. When was the last time your team has been out to just check those signs and check those locations?
Honestly, Reverend, I'm not sure of the answer to that question. I'm not sure if our team puts those signs up or DOT does. I would imagine DOT probably puts them up, but I will double check on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Maury from CB2.
Thank you, Khalil. Thank you, Borough President. Brian, thank you very much. I want to just, the presentation was great. You and your team are always great. I want to point out that Brian came to CB2 several months ago, did a presentation, which was wonderful. The community really liked it. Our board members really appreciated it. Obviously, in CB2, we have a few different issues. We had people lose their lives during the floods recently in Woodside and in other areas. Horrible. We also have issues because much of Long Island City is in a floodplain, and CB1 and CB2 both have to deal with that. And I think one of the challenges with that, of course, is that in that concentrated area where you have so many people and the city has not kept up with vital services, whether it's transportation and resources. So my concern is, how do we get people out quick enough if they need to not stay in place? And the other concern is, you guys have this fantastic resource that emergency management book in so many different languages. I think one of the things I like about it is it's very focused and there's not too much information. I think listening to all of this tonight, there are so many questions and concerns because there's so many different kinds of emergencies. We've talked a lot about flooding tonight. Obviously, there are other kinds of natural disasters. There's fires, there's terrorist attacks, there's, active shooters, whatever. So I guess my big concern is, making it easy for people, the general public, to figure out what to do when there is an emergency. And I think also, to Betty's point, I think it was such a good question because, there's always so much controversy when we bring up cars and community. And I think in terms of Betty's question, what she addressed, and when there is an emergency, if you have a flash flood, obviously there's an issue of personal property with a car, but there's also that vehicle turning into a weapon because it's floating fast or in danger. So I think this idea of figuring out a place to get these vehicles out of the way and so that they're not being damaged or injuring people, it would be crucial.
No, I think both of those are really good points. And so I'll start with the how do you get people out? So in the event of a coastal storm evacuation, the evacuation order is going to be implemented several days before landfall or 0 hour. That's the time where it's no longer safe for people to be out and about. We work with our partners in the MTA, and as I was saying before, to help those folks with disability access and functional needs to get out of those communities and get to the hurricane evacuation shelters. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, I think LaGuardia High School in Astoria is probably the closest to the Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, Maspeth area. But yeah, no, totally noted. But that's again why we want people thinking about this now before something happens. And that's why we're leaning on you guys to help us get out into those communities. Like when I came out to your community board. And thank you again for not holding me to the baked goods I owe you for that. But that said, what was the second question? I'm sorry.
It was the issue, Betty's point about cars, and the cars not only need to be protected for personal property issues, but they can be a danger to the public, pets, humans, etc.
Totally. Yeah. No, so there's sort of a, I don't have an answer to this question. I'm just going to say that with a flash flood, it is what it sounds like. It's a flash flood. It's happening very quickly. And unfortunately, with like meteorological technology and the way the city's landscape is situated, we don't necessarily know where the flooding is going to occur. And by the time we have the chance to do that, the flooding is already happening. So it's not a perfect system. That's why we're telling people, in these dangerous conditions, either stay inside, or if you're in a basement apartment, get to that higher ground within your building if you can.
So in a non-flash flood, but if there's going to be hurricanes, earthquake, whatever it is, some kind of emergency, and it's not a flash flood and there is planning, we don't want, the cars getting into into a position where they can hurt people or other property. So maybe there's a place like Betty suggested that they could be moved to.
Yeah, I'll follow up on these questions. This is a topic that clearly we should get some information to you folks on.
Thanks.
Thank you, Maury. Next, we have Heather from CB6.
Good evening, Brian. Thank you so much for all of this tonight. It's so important. August and September seem to be pretty hot months. My district is at pretty reasonably high elevation, so we don't normally have to discuss flooding in our district, but last year, Ida seemed to really change that for us. Sections of our community that find themselves, that were sort of built on previous swampland, found themselves flooded. And as you know, we had people who lost their lives in basement apartments. I wanted to ask, and I think you already alluded to this in your previous answer to Maury's question, was awareness and early detection, and knowing ahead of time, because it seemed with Ida that we all sort of got caught by surprise in sort of how it affected Riga Park, Forest Hills. Were not affected during Sandy. We're highly elevated, but it was totally different during Ida. We had sections of our community that were surprisingly flooded, both along the Grand Central Parkway and a bit off of Yellowstone. And so it was very surprising to us. So my question is, have we improved at all our capacity to sort of project at least the size of the storm that we are expecting, so that people can start to think? Because my understanding is with Ida, there was even a sort of, not downplaying, but not a full appreciation for what the scope of that storm was going to be. So I'm wondering, number one, have we gotten a little bit better at sort of better understanding the scope of these storms, do you think, for this season?
So let me preface just that I am not a meteorologist. But we have been doing a lot of work surrounding preparing for flash flooding. The flash flood plan that we hold is one of the most activated plans that we have. I believe in 2021, it was activated 16 times, and in 2020, it was activated 9 times. So we are not strangers to activating this plan and ensuring that we're working across the city with our agency partners to prepare for flooding. That said, we have taken specific things into consideration. One of the things that we're looking to do, that we look to do prior to flash flooding, is to do some targeted street level cleaning and maintenance activities to mitigate potential flooding at reoccurring flood locations and locations with flood related complaints. So like catch basin cleaning and roadway cleaning. We're also we at Emergency Management we interact with the National Weather Service constantly. We do check-ins, I think, daily, if not multiple times a day. But we also now have our own in-house meteorologist, and we work with our colleagues at sanitation who have their meteorologists, and our utility partners that are all looking at the meteorological thing. We all try to make sure we're all on the same page. So we're really stepping up our coordinative efforts towards flash flooding. We know this is what's on a lot of people's minds, and obviously so after Ida, when we saw such unprecedented rainfall accumulation in such a short amount of time. This is, also something to be said. The prior administration released a new normal report. This is something we're going to have to adapt to. We're working to get the messaging out across the city about how to prepare for these events. And one thing I want to make abundantly clear, something I should have brought up earlier, the flood maps for coastal storms and the maps that DEP just put out about rain flooding, those are two totally different things. What happens in a coastal storm scenario is entirely different from what happens in a flash flood event. They're just two entirely different weather events. And we just want to be clear about that when we're talking about these types of weather emergencies.
A question about public schools. One of the things that happened in our district, where we have several schools that utilize basements because you're getting a bevy of supplies that are coming in as you're leading up to the school year. Is there a way, do you work with public schools in regards to awareness of upcoming storms and planning for storms? For example, because I know a lot of schools in our district had to very quickly reorder existing supplies because the basements got flooded and those supplies had to be discarded. Do you have a plan to be working with local public schools?
So we work with the Department of Education in a number of different on many different plans. So DOE actually has their own emergency management division, and they're in constant contact with us. And we work with them, and they can report into us any needs that they have that they can't fix themselves. And we're in constant contact with them. While we're on the topic of schools, I want to just make sure that I'm plugging our kids emergency preparedness program. We have our resident superhero Ready Girl. She can go out to elementary and middle schools and give kids a age-appropriate presentation for how to be prepared for emergencies, and it's something that they can then take back to their parents and help plan as a family. So we always want to encourage folks to try to book up Ready Girl for their schools when school comes back in session.
Thank you. And the last question I have is regarding outreach to people and trying to get people's attention. I know it's challenging. We have challenges as well. We can plug it 20,000 times on Twitter and Facebook, and people say, well, I didn't know. And I'm like, well, we keep saying it out loud, and we say it at our meetings. We send it on distribution lists. I'm wondering if you thought about utilizing, especially in August, when that seems to be when storms are on an uptick, utilizing technology like Link NYC, maybe putting out a PSA that runs on not just on television, but also runs on streamed radio like Pandora, like Spotify, that is pushing people to sign up for Notify NYC, that is pushing people to make a plan, that is sort of captivating people in places where we don't normally, where like community boards, for example, aren't normally occupying the space.
So that's an excellent question, and we are trying to do different things to reach out to the community, or to reach those communities. If you've noticed, maybe you've seen a bunch of our ads in bus shelters. We have those in a number of different languages across the bus shelters. We're also looking into other forms of advertising. I'm not in the comm shop. I don't have the specifics on what they're looking to do, but we have been looking into other avenues to get our messaging out there, and we're certainly open to any suggestions. I don't know the particulars about Spotify and Pandora and stuff like that, but I think I'm happy to bring that back to our communications director and see if they've pursued that sort of avenue.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering all my questions tonight. Appreciate all you do. It's important.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. Next question will be from Betty, again from CB10.
Hey, Betty.
Betty, you're muted.
Thank you, Maury, for backing up the issue on the cars. Maury's perfectly correct. One of the things that did happen during Sandy was these thousands of pounds of metal did become weapons. They did end up in places where they shouldn't be. So that is a reality that we have to deal. But more importantly, when we talk about Sandy and we talk about Ida, you know, I appreciate very much, Brian, that you made the distinction between the type of flooding that we get from coastal storms and the type of flooding that we get from rain events. Worst case scenario for us is going to be when we get a Sandy and an Ida at the same time. And we've got to, I think, do a better job of messaging to people what to expect in whatever neighborhoods they're in. You know, I know in my area, we're going to have coastal flooding and what we have to do there. I know what I have to do in the areas that get rain flooding. But when we have both together, we're going to have to come up with some very clear messaging for people. And I think as a city, we need to do a better job of that kind of messaging so that people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, Betty, you're not going to find any disagreement from me on that. One of our agency's core missions is to constantly improve after emergencies and make sure that we are learning from past emergencies. So that's something that we built into our mission, and we are committed to doing that. So, you know, we're always looking to improve. We don't believe that we can be perfect. I've never seen us be perfect. So we're always looking to improve, and we'll continue to do that. And if we'll continue to hone our messaging, you know, as we continue to adapt to the realities of, you know, the current emergencies in New York City.
I appreciate that. If it was a perfect world, we'd make a law. You can't have both events at the same time.
If it was a perfect world, I wouldn't have a job.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, BP.
Righty, thank you all for your questions tonight. I want to thank you all for attending tonight's Borough Board and Cabinet meeting. I want to thank our presenters for doing a fantastic job on their presentations, but more importantly, I'm definitely interested in the follow-up. Also want to thank the rest of my staff here at Borough Hall for the planning of this meeting. Our next Borough Board meeting will be held on Monday, September 12th at 5:30 p.m. And our next Borough Cabinet meeting will be held on Tuesday, September 13th at 9:30 a.m. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your summer. See you all in September. God bless.